How is it possible that a 2023 promo card can sell for more money than one of the most iconic Pokemon cards of all time? When I was at a card show and I saw this happening right before my eyes, I knew I had to dig deeper to figure out what was going on. So stay tuned, guys, and let's get into the video. The cards we're going to be looking at today is the Gogh Pikachu and the Base Set Charizard. So in order for me to determine how rare these cards were, I started to do research on exactly how big the print run was for the Base Set Charizard and get an estimation of how many Base Set Charizards there actually are in existence. So based on the data and the print runs, the estimation I got was roughly 2 million Base Set Charizards. So surprisingly enough, there's less Gogh Pikachu than actual Base Set Charizards. So if we look at the data for the Gogh Pikachu, it's probably in the 500,000 range. So it's definitely possible that the Gogh Pikachu is a rarer card. But the crazy thing to me is this card was essentially free at some point. You could get it simply by just ordering from the Pokémon Center. And I really got to thinking about exactly what is driving the sky-high prices of these cards, because to me, as a collector, I think cultural significance is one of the main drivers of price action in Pokemon cards, but there definitely has to be something deeper going on. So when we look at a card's scarcity, there's actually multiple kinds of scarcity that all interact with the card, and the print scarcity is only one of the factors involved. So with a lot of these older cards, the reason they get so expensive, especially in high grades, is because a lot of them simply just didn't survive to the modern day in good condition. If you had the cards as a kid, you know what I'm talking about. A lot of us played with the cards, we traded the cards, we handled them, and honestly, back in the day, I didn't even know what a top loader was. So to find some of these vintage cards in great condition is simply extremely rare. So if we look at the near mint and lightly played copies, even though there may be 2 million Base Set Charizard cards in existence, a lot of them may not have even survived until today, and even less of those cards survived in good condition. And when we look at the grading data, it's extremely apparent that PSA 10s, 9s are extremely rare. And also, they're not traded in the same way as a modern card is traded in the marketplace. So obviously, when a card immediately comes out, it's at its highest abundancy because people immediately sell that card when they get it, and it interacts with the market because there's less people absolving those cards and more people just trying to sell them. So initially, when the Pikachu Gogh promo came out, you could easily get one less than $100, and even if you ordered some from the Pokemon Center, you could get that essentially free with your order. So all these scarcity factors play into the pricing, but there definitely is something a little bit deeper going on, and we're going to go ahead and get into that too. So I was walking around the card show and I was seeing all the prices, and within a Base Set Charizard, if you're looking for that at a card show, you can find so much variation in price between even sellers at a card show. So if you wanted to sell a Gogh Pikachu, for example, and you were trying to sell it double the market price, you simply would not be able to move that card because the condition is relatively standardized. It's not very often that you're going to find copies with damage, lightly played, moderately played, and when you compare that to a Charizard, there's so many different conditions that a Charizard can come in. So one of the things this really got me thinking about is friction, right? So let's say that you're a buyer and you're interested in buying a Base Set Charizard. You have so many different options on cards that you can purchase at so many different price points. So I think that causes a lot of friction when people are buying these cards, and that friction causes the market to stagnate in a way that it doesn't stagnate exactly with more modern cards. Because what you have to consider is buyers want confidence that they're paying a fair price for a card. And the more variables that are involved, the more friction that's involved in pricing that card, right? So if a dealer prices the card slightly above market, or maybe there's a crease in the card. And one of the things that I've noticed the most in the card business is the reason grading is so popular is because people love the standardization of the grading system. Now, we all know that grading can be inconsistent. You could send the same card to a grading company and have a standard deviation of the grade that you receive. But what I really started to learn is that grading commoditizes these cards and really ultimately reduces the friction when someone buys the card. They don't have to guess what condition the card is in. They already have a standard grade that tells them, hey, this card is a 7, an 8, whatever the grade may be. So when you add that friction into the cards and buying the cards, I think that definitely causes the market to stagnate. And the more friction that's involved, the harder it is for these cards to sell. And I think that ultimately causes friction on increases of prices, at least from what I've seen regarding the base set Charizard. For me, as far as my collecting goes, I definitely prefer older cards, and one of the things that I really focus on is cultural significance. So something like a base set Charizard is easily recognizable. Everyone knows what it is. It's very nostalgic, and I think that carries a lot of value in the marketplace. And I really think that the scarcity of that specific card really matters. But one of the things I'm really starting to recognize is markets live and die by the efficiency of their pricing structure. And I think that's one of the reasons why modern cards sell for so much more money sometimes than vintage cards, is because it really takes an expertise to buy vintage cards. And not to say someone can't buy a card and maybe it has a crease in it, maybe they underpay for an item. But all those things, I think, create a lot of friction when people are looking for cards and buying cards in general. And I think now that I've been collecting Pokemon cards for so long, it's really interesting to me that the more casual collector just wants to be able to show up to a show, buy a card, know what the price is, know how much the cards go for, and that's just so much easier in modern cards. Because if you really think about it, there's so much condition variation in vintage cards, and there's so much disagreement too. I think what I learned is condition is completely relative, not just to the individual and how they evaluate condition, but even within different marketplaces, right? So if you go to a card show and you're looking for a card, the average person that goes to card shows is a lot more established as a collector than someone casually browsing on eBay. So when you take a marketplace and condense it, and then you take it to a global marketplace, you're definitely going to see different price action. So I think that's something really important to consider, is how modern cards attract buyers much easier than vintage cards, and it's a lot less work. And I think as much as people like to talk about how they don't like grading, and me personally, I'm on the fence about sending my cards in for grading and exactly when and if I'm going to do that, just because of some of the inconsistencies. But I think the main value in grading is standardizing the condition of the cards, and people really seem to like that and respond to that. And I think as time goes on, like with tag for example, is going to have more of a role making the Pokemon card market much more efficient. So when there's more tools involved to authenticate, condition, and ultimately get the market price of a card, it's going to reduce a lot of the friction in collectibles. And I think that ultimately will lead to higher prices because it creates less friction. Because right now, I think vintage cards are harder to buy, and I think it stops a lot of people from collecting vintage cards or even selling vintage cards because of how much friction exactly is involved. So let me know, guys. Let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate you guys tuning in and listening to the discussion about this particular topic. But let me know, guys, what kind of cards do you like to collect? What do you think about vintage cards and modern cards and the prices that we're seeing now? I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments. And thank you guys again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.